Hello, friends. Today I'll tell you about the 1973 fantasy drama directed by Stephanie Rothman titled Terminal Island. The film explores an intriguing concept about individuals convicted of serious crimes being sent to a remote island. While the execution may feel somewhat dated, the core idea remains fascinating. In the story, television journalists review archival footage of this unusual place. 3 years ago, the death penalty for first-degree offenders was replaced by exile. Now those convicted are sent to San Bernardino Island, better known as Terminal Island. Escape is deemed impossible since the island is surrounded by minefields, and the only narrow passage for boats is heavily guarded by a naval destroyer. The journalists begin filming a new documentary, focusing on the latest arrivals to the island. Among them are Bobby, involved in a $2 million heist, Lee Phillips, who sabotaged a bank after it refused to transfer money in her name, Eddie Collins, responsible for a serious crime involving a law enforcement officer, Bunny Campbell, who harmed her own parents, Joylyn, who poisoned her spouse, Dr. Norman Milford, a serial offender. And then there's the newest arrival, Carmen Sims. The journalists are thrilled with their compelling material. Carmen is transported to the island. A police officer reads her rights before leaving her on the shore. The first thing she notices in the coastal waters is the remains of previous inmates. She sets up a temporary shelter for the night, unaware that a man is watching her from a nearby cliff. As she struggles to start a fire, the man approaches her. He offers her some locally grown tobacco, which she declines. The man introduces himself as Dr. Milford and mentions that there is a camp nearby with around 40 inmates. When asked about the number of women on the island, the doctor regretfully notes that there are very few. He then adds that while everyone here is a criminal, he himself is innocent. Carmen gives him a knowing smile. The doctor departs, leaving Carmen to spend the night on the beach. In the morning, she heads to the inmate camp. Bobby, the camp leader, emerges from his hut along with his loyal right-hand man, Monk. Carmen confidently walks into the camp, which is populated by numerous men and only 3 women. She attempts to strike up a conversation with Monk, but he decides to assert his dominance. Carmen shouts for help, but no one intervenes. Even the women silently retreat to their hut. That evening, the female inmates find Carmen sleeping on their mattress. After a heated argument, Carmen prepares to leave, but they stop her. The women explain that they are considered the camp's most valuable resource and are not allowed to leave. Unwilling to accept this, Carmen resolves to change the status quo. However, the next morning, she is forced to join the others in their labor, tilling the soil for a vegetable garden. After a grueling day, she asks if anyone has ever tried to stand up to Bobby and his gang. She learns that while some have fled, there is no guarantee they are any better. Occasionally, fights break out among the men, but Bobby and Monk swiftly and brutally suppress them. During the day, the women are tasked with building a storage shed. Carmen works so hard that her hands bleed, prompting the doctor to offer help, though he is quickly dismissed by a supervisor. That evening, Monk announces that the women will work a night shift, except for Bunny, who is reserved for Bobby alone. The next morning, the women distribute food to the men and witness a violent altercation that ends with the defeated being thrown off a cliff, a grim version of a burial ritual. After lunch, the women are escorted to a stream to do laundry. There they are ambushed by escaped inmates who had rejected Bobby's rule. Overpowering the guards, the escapees take the women with them. Bobby is furious and orders his men to track down the escapees and retrieve the women. That night, around a campfire, the escapees celebrate their successful raid and mock Bobby's frustration. Over time, bonds form among the escapees, leading to romantic pairings. However, one man, Teller, who is left without a partner, starts a conflict. The others quickly subdue him, firmly stating that violence will no longer be tolerated. The next day, the escapees decide to move their camp to a new location. The women are unhappy about it, but have no choice. At the stream, Lee discovers saltpeter, which can be used to make gunpowder. Meanwhile, Carmen collects a poisonous plant suitable for crafting a toxin, a skill she learned from her grandmother, who had an interest in herbal remedies. Back at Bobby's camp, he orders a thorough search of the island. The next morning, his men attack the escapees' camp, resulting in a brutal fight that claims several lives. Cornell stays behind to buy time for the others to flee and confronts Monk in a fierce struggle. The escapees manage to escape, but one of the men is wounded. To save him, Eddie ventures out to find the doctor and brings him back to the camp. Unfortunately, the doctor is unable to save the man. The following morning, the group discusses their situation. They realize they can no longer keep running and must eliminate Bobby and his gang. Lee begins crafting makeshift grenades while Carmen prepares poison. After burying their fallen comrade, the doctor decides to stay with his new group. At Bobby's camp, one of the inmates assembles a simple radio, allowing Bobby to tune into a useful frequency. Meanwhile, the escapees grind ingredients for gunpowder under Lee's supervision. Eventually, they produce real grenades stored in flasks, ready to be lit and thrown. At the same time, Bunny wanders off to a waterfall, where Bobby's men capture her. Using the radio, they learn that a supply boat is scheduled to arrive in the morning. Bobby's group ties Bunny to wooden posts on the shore, and Bobby starts hitting her with a belt. The women in the escapee camp want to intervene but realize they are outnumbered. As this unfolds, Bobby notices a police boat approaching. He and his men hide among the rocks. The officers unload crates of supplies on the shore. One officer, moved by Bunny's plight, rushes to help her. Meanwhile, one of Bobby's men swims to the boat, overpowers the remaining officer on board, takes his firearm, and fires at those on the shore. Bobby's gang arms themselves, leaves a guard at the boat, and heads back to their camp. The escapees strategize on how to seize the weapons and decide to approach by water. One of them swims to the boat and neutralizes the guard with a blowpipe. Now they have a pistol and access to the boat, from which they drain the fuel. The doctor sees Bunny and rushes to help her. Back at Bobby's camp, he accuses Monk of cowardice. Monk defends himself, saying that too many lives have already been lost. That night by the fire, the doctor confides in the group. He reveals that he was convicted for disconnecting a terminally ill patient from life support. He explains that he doesn't want to return to the mainland, where he feels betrayed. The next morning, the group approaches Bobby's camp but finds it empty. They formulate a plan. The women prepare fuel canisters, and Bunny is tasked with pouring the fuel through pipes to ignite the storage building at the right moment. The first explosion occurs in the latrine, killing one of Bobby's men. Chaos ensues as Bobby and Monk fire their stolen weapons. In the ensuing gunfight, Cornell is fatally injured. Bobby retreats to the storage building. Lee grabs a grenade and rushes toward the bunker. An explosion follows, but Bobby survives and shoots Lee in the back, killing her. A wounded Monk crawls to Bobby's bunker and pleads to be let in. Together, they continue to fire back. Monk grows frustrated with Bobby's wasteful use of ammunition. Joy signals Bunny to act, but Bunny freezes, unable to recall her task. She tries to assist an injured man, but is hit by gunfire. The doctor rushes to her aid, moves her to safety, and sets the fuel alight himself. Bobby notices the smell of gasoline too late. The explosion destroys the bunker. From the flames emerges a burning Bobby. A furious Eddie spots Monk and prepares to shoot him, but stops. Monk, badly burned and blinded, poses no further threat. It's over. Peace returns to the camp. The survivors begin rebuilding, and the now blind Monk is tasked with fetching water. The doctor and Bunny walk to the shore, where the arriving police request Dr. Milford to return to the mainland for a new trial. However, the doctor replies that Milford is dead and decides to stay on the island, which has become his home. As the story concludes, a new woman steps ashore, greeted with the words, "Welcome to Terminal Island." This film is one of many in the women in prison genre, popular in the 1970s, a time when women's rights movements were a major topic in the United States. Such films often depicted wrongfully convicted women as beautiful and resilient, triumphing in the end to find justice and love.